When I turned 16 at the beginning of autumn, and instead of asking my parents for a party or expensive gifts, I asked if I could spend a weekend camping with my two closest friends. We'd been exploring the bush for years with our families and knew the trails around Stanley Forest better than most adults. My dad had taught me how to pitch a tent, start a fire safely, and respect the land. My friends Liam and Chloe had grown up doing the same. My parents weren't thrilled about us staying out there alone, but after enough convincing, they agreed. Dad even helped us pack the Uda before dropping us off near a quiet creek that was far enough from the main track to feel isolated but close enough that we'd be easy to find if something went wrong. Before he left, he smiled and said, "If anything feels off, don't try to be brave. Ring me." At the time, I laughed and promised I would do just that. The first few hours were exactly what we'd hoped for. We built a small campfire, skipped rocks across the creek, and joked about how we'd probably hear possums fighting all night. The forest had that comforting mix of eucalyptus and damp earth, and the only sounds were birds settling into the trees and water flowing over smooth stones. It was peaceful enough that we forgot how far away the nearest town actually was. Late in the afternoon, the sound of an engine echoed through the trees. A dark Jeep rolled slowly into the clearing and stopped about 20 meters from our campsite. A man climbed out first. He looked to be in his 30s, wearing camouflage pants and carrying a compound bow over one shoulder. A woman about the same age stepped out beside him. She smiled almost immediately, but something about it felt rehearsed, like she was trying too hard to seem friendly. "Didn't expect anyone else out here," the man said as he walked closer. I shrugged. "Just camping for my birthday." "Oh yeah," he replied. "Mind if we hang around for a bit? We're checking out a campsite nearby." I noticed him looking over each of us instead of at us, lingering just a little too long whenever his eyes landed on Chloe. "We're all under 18, I said casually. "Our parents know exactly where we are." Something changed in both their expressions for only a second. The woman forced another smile. "Fair enough," she said. "Maybe we'll catch you later." They got back into the Jeep and drove away without another word. We joked about how weird they were, but after a few minutes, the conversation drifted back to normal. At least, that's what I tried to convince myself. As the sun started dropping behind the trees, Liam poked the fire with a stick and frowned. "Did you hear that?" she asked. Footsteps. Not from the road. From the bush. The couple stepped into the clearing on foot, almost silently. I hadn't heard a vehicle return, and there weren't any obvious tracks leading toward us. It was as if they'd been standing somewhere in the forest watching us. "Thought we'd come say hello properly," the woman said. The man reached into a backpack and pulled out a bottle, and said, "I got a few drinks if you're interested." "We're good," I answered. "No worries. We've got something stronger if that's more your thing." Liam laughed awkwardly. "Definitely not." The man's smile disappeared almost instantly. Then he asked if we are sure we don't want some. I answered positive. They stood there for several uncomfortable seconds before finally walking away again. None of us spoke until they had disappeared between the trees. "That was weird," Chloe whispered. "No kidding," Liam muttered. Darkness settled faster than I expected. The fire became our only real source of light, throwing long shadows across the trees. Every crack of a branch made us look up. Every gust of wind sounded like footsteps. I kept telling myself we were overreacting. Then a flashlight appeared. It wasn't coming down the road. It was weaving through the trees. The beam stopped just outside the edge of our camp. The man stepped into view while the woman lingered behind him. This time, neither of them smiled. "You kids still awake?" he asked. "What do you want?" I said. "Just talking." He walked closer to Chloe while keeping one hand buried inside his jacket pocket. The woman drifted toward Liam and me as if they were trying to separate us without making it obvious. Trying to break the silence, I noticed the bow leaning against his shoulder again. "Catch any wallabies?" I asked. His face hardened immediately. Then he said, "You're asking a lot of questions, mate." "I was just curious," I replied him, and he fired back immediately, "Mind your own business." The tension became so thick that nobody moved. After another long moment, the woman quietly said, "Come on." The man stared at us for another few seconds before the two of them disappeared back into the darkness. We watched their flashlight until it should have reached the road. Instead, it turned sharply uphill into dense bush where no trail existed. "I don't like this," Chloe whispered. After waiting a few minutes, I quietly slipped away to see if they really had another campsite. I followed the direction where we'd first seen the Jeep and eventually found it parked behind thick scrub, almost hidden from view. There was no tent, no fire, no chairs, no sleeping bags, nothing. It looked less like campers and more like people waiting. When I hurried back, Chloe met me halfway. "I heard them," she whispered, barely able to speak. "They were over near those trees." "What were they saying?" I couldn't hear everything, but the woman laughed. And one of them said, "This is going to be fun." Every instinct told me we needed to leave, but hiking through unfamiliar bush in complete darkness seemed just as dangerous. Instead, I pulled out my phone and called my dad. He answered on the second ring. "I need you to come now." He didn't ask questions. He said, "I'm on my way." 20 minutes never felt so long. Dad called back while driving. "Listen carefully," he said. "Take everyone down to the creek. No torches, no talking. Stay low until I get there." We crouched behind the creek bank, barely breathing. Somewhere uphill, I saw another flashlight drifting through the trees, moving slowly back and forth like someone searching. Then bright headlights exploded through the forest. Dad's four-wheel drive burst into the clearing, floodlights blazing. His old military working dog jumped from the back before the vehicle had even stopped, barking toward the ridge. A flashlight shot away through the bush at full speed. Dad never chased them. He just looked at us and said, "Pack your gear, right now." We loaded everything into the Uta in less than 5 minutes. On the drive home, Dad stayed unusually quiet. Finally, he glanced at me. "They weren't hunting animals. What do you think they wanted?" He gripped the steering wheel tighter. "I don't think you boys were the reason they kept coming back." None of us argued. Years have passed since that night, and I've returned to Stanley Forest more than once. I've never seen that couple again. But every now and then, when I'm setting up camp and the bush falls quiet just before sunset, I remember the hidden Jeep with no campsite, and the flashlight that never once stayed on the road. I was 12 years old when something happened that completely changed the way I looked at dreams. Before then, nightmares were just nightmares. I'd wake up scared, drink some water, maybe leave the hallway light on, and forget about them by the next afternoon. After that night, I stopped believing that every dream stayed inside your own head. Even now, more than a decade later, I still sleep with my bedroom door locked, security cameras around my house, and a habit of checking every window before I go to bed. Maybe that sounds paranoid, but if you'd experienced what my cousin and I did that night, you'd probably do the same. It started on a completely normal Friday. My older cousin Emily was staying at our house for the weekend while my aunt and uncle attended a family wedding a few hours away. She was 14, so naturally she acted like she was much older and cooler than I was, but we got along well. My parents made up a mattress for her on the floor of my room, and we stayed awake talking about school, music, and random things until my mom reminded us it was getting late. I remember glancing at the digital clock beside my bed. It read 9:34. Emily laughed and said, "Watch. One of us is going to have a weird dream after eating all that pizza." We both laughed, turned off the light, and fell asleep. The dream felt ordinary at first. I was walking through a huge shopping center with my parents and my younger brother. Everything looked strangely familiar, even though I didn't recognize the place. The stores had no names, the ceiling lights seemed dimmer than they should have been, and there were surprisingly few people around. We wandered from one shop to another while my brother begged for toys and my dad joked about how expensive everything was. It felt peaceful until I noticed a girl standing outside one of the stores. She couldn't have been much older than me. She wore a plain white hoodie and had long dark hair hanging over one side of her face. What stood out wasn't the way she looked. It was the smile. It never changed. She wasn't smiling because she was happy. She looked like someone pretending to smile because they'd forgotten what a real smile was supposed to look like. I tried ignoring her, but every time we entered another store, she'd be there again, standing farther inside or waiting outside the entrance. She never spoke. She only watched. "Do you see her?" I quietly asked Emily. She looked over my shoulder. "The girl." I nodded. Emily frowned. "That's weird." A few minutes later, she pointed toward a restroom. "I'll be right back." She walked inside, and I waited outside with my family. 5 minutes passed, then 10. I knocked on the restroom door. "Emily?" Nothing. My parents had somehow disappeared too. I searched the nearby stores, calling everyone's names. The shopping center suddenly felt much larger than before. Every hallway looked identical. Every shop was empty, and the overhead music had stopped. The silence made every footstep echo. When I finally reached the parking lot, our family car was sitting exactly where we'd left it. Empty. All 4 doors were wide open. The engine was still running. I felt that first wave of panic settle into my stomach. I remember whispering to myself, "This isn't real." As I turned back toward the entrance, I saw the smiling girl again. She was standing inside the automatic doors, waiting. Then I heard the roar of an engine. A large red truck came speeding across the parking lot far too fast, its headlights aimed directly toward me. I tried to move, but my legs wouldn't work. Just before it reached me, everything went black. I sat upright in bed, gasping for air. The room was dark except for the faint glow of my alarm clock. For a few seconds I felt relieved. Then I noticed something. Emily's mattress was gone. I blinked several times. It wasn't just empty. It was gone. The blanket, pillow, everything. Confused, I climbed out of bed and stepped into the hallway. The house felt wrong. Usually I could hear the hum of the refrigerator or my dad snoring faintly from down the hall. Instead, there was complete silence. "Mom?" I called out, no answer. "Dad?" Nothing. Every room I checked was empty. My heartbeat became so loud I could barely hear anything else. The only room left was my parents' bedroom. The door stood slightly open. I pushed it wider and froze. The room looked like someone had abandoned it in the middle of the night. Lamps were knocked over, furniture had been moved, and family photos lay scattered across the floor with cracked glass. I couldn't see my parents anywhere, but something about the room made every instinct tell me not to step inside. Then I heard my little brother crying. The sound came from the open window. I ran toward it just in time to see a tall figure outside disappearing into the darkness with my brother in its arms. The stranger wore a brown jacket, dark trousers, and a faded red cap pulled low over its face. I shouted until my throat hurt. The figure never looked back. A red truck rolled slowly down the street before accelerating into the darkness. Without thinking, I sprinted outside barefoot. The winter air felt painfully cold against my skin. My feet slapped against the pavement as I chased the fading taillights until they vanished around a corner. Everything became strangely quiet again. I was completely alone. Then I woke up. For real this time. I shot upright so suddenly that I almost fell out of bed. The digital clock read 3:18 a.m. Someone else was breathing heavily in the room. Emily. She was sitting up on her mattress staring straight ahead. "You had it too," she whispered before I could say a word. My stomach dropped. What? She looked at me with tears in her eyes. I dreamed we were in a shopping center. I didn't say anything. I went into the restroom, she continued quietly. There was a girl standing at the sink. Every hair on my arms stood up. What did she look like? Emily swallowed hard. She smiled the whole time. I felt cold all over. Emily described how she'd walked into the restroom and found a girl silently washing her hands. The girl never blinked, never looked away. After a few moments, she began calmly pulling at her own fingernails one by one, dropping them into the sink without reacting. Emily backed toward the door, but when she reached for the handle, it was gone. There wasn't any way out, she whispered. The girl slowly looked up, still smiling. Then she reached toward her own mouth and began pulling at her teeth as casually as if she were brushing them. Emily screamed and stumbled backward. Instead of hitting the floor, she fell straight through it. She landed in the middle of the street where she'd grown up as a little kid. Only the neighborhood wasn't right. Every house seemed farther away than it should have been. She ran toward her old home, but no matter how fast she moved, it never got any closer. When she looked to her left, the smiling girl was running beside her without making a sound. I could hear her breathing, Emily said. That's all. She kept running until she felt cold fingers brush the back of her neck. That's when she woke up. Neither of us slept again that night. We spent hours comparing details we hadn't shared before falling asleep. The shopping center, the smiling girl, the strange feeling that someone wanted us separated. Neither of us had been watching horror movies, reading scary stories, or talking about anything remotely similar. We couldn't explain why our dreams overlapped so closely. Life eventually returned to normal, at least on the surface. Emily refused to use public restrooms by herself for years. I developed habits that have never gone away. I double-check locks. I installed cameras as soon as I owned my own house. Every once in a while, I'll wake up around 3 in the morning, convinced someone is standing just outside my bedroom door. I've never seen that smiling girl again. But sometimes, when I'm walking through a nearly empty shopping center and catch someone standing perfectly still in my peripheral vision, I feel that same knot form in my stomach. I never look twice anymore, because a part of me still wonders what would happen if she was actually there, waiting for one of us to notice her again. The biggest mistake I made wasn't agreeing to go camping. I used to believe you can really know someone after only a few months. At 19, I thought sharing classes, late-night conversations, and a dorm room was enough to call someone a friend. I learned the hard way that some people can build an entire fake life if it helps them get close to the people they want. I had just finished my first semester of college in Boston when I met Aaron and Noah. We were assigned to the same dorm suite, and we clicked almost immediately. They were into hiking, visiting abandoned places, ghost stories, and every weird mystery you could imagine. Most nights we'd stay awake until 2 in the morning watching videos about haunted forests and unsolved disappearances instead of studying. Aaron was outgoing and always seemed to have another crazy idea. Noah was quieter, but he had this dry sense of humor that caught everyone off guard. Within a couple of months, it felt like we'd known each other for years. When winter break arrived, Aaron suggested taking a camping trip before everyone went home for Christmas. We should do something we'll actually remember, he said. The Pine Barrens? Noah added. I'd heard the stories about that forest since I was a kid. Endless miles of woods, abandoned roads, strange local legends, and enough missing person stories to make anyone think twice about wandering too far from a trail. That was exactly why Aaron wanted to go. I invited my friend Ryan from high school to come with us. He'd met Aaron and Noah a couple of times around campus and liked them well enough. They're a little weird, Ryan joked. So are we. He laughed. Fair point. The day we left started with something that should have stood out more than it did. Aaron insisted we wait until almost 3 in the afternoon before leaving. Ryan frowned. Wouldn't it make more sense to leave early? It'll be dark before we even get there. Aaron shrugged. Less traffic. It didn't really make sense, but none of us argued. Noah was driving his SUV, Aaron sat in the passenger seat, and Ryan and I settled into the back. The drive was mostly uneventful. We talked, listened to music, and stopped once for gas. As the hours passed, the roads became quieter. Streetlights disappeared. Houses grew farther apart until there were none at all. The GPS estimated we were about an hour from our destination when Noah slowed the vehicle. "I need to take a leak," he said. He pulled onto a narrow one-way road surrounded by dense forest. There wasn't another vehicle in sight. Aaron stretched and opened his door. "I'll go too." Neither of them took a flashlight. They disappeared between the trees, laughing about something neither Ryan nor I could hear. At first we didn't think anything of it. 5 minutes passed, then 10. Ryan checked his phone. No signal. I leaned forward. "What are they doing?" Ryan rolled his eyes. "Probably messing with us." Another few minutes went by. Finally I climbed out. "Come on." Ryan followed. The moment both our doors shut, we heard the unmistakable click of the vehicle locking itself. "You've got to be kidding." The keys were still with Noah. I tried every door. Locked. Ryan cupped his hands around his mouth and called out for Noah. Nothing. Aaron. Only silence answered us. We started walking toward the trees where they'd disappeared, calling their names every few seconds. The deeper we went, the quieter everything became. Even the wind seemed to disappear. "I don't like this," Ryan muttered. Neither did I. Something about the forest felt strangely empty. No insects, no birds, nothing. Then, somewhere deeper in the woods, an engine roared to life. Not a car, a chainsaw. Ryan froze. What the hell? The sound grew louder. Branches snapped. A figure burst from the darkness wearing a black hoodie and work gloves. His face was hidden behind a dark mask, but the running chainsaw in his hands was impossible to miss. He didn't yell. He didn't threaten us. He just sprinted straight toward us. I shouted, "Run!" We turned and ran as fast as we could. I could hear the chainsaw revving behind us, sometimes sounding only a few feet away, sometimes farther back. Branches whipped against my face while my boots slipped on wet leaves. Every time I risked looking over my shoulder, I saw the beam of a flashlight bouncing through the trees behind the masked man. There was more than one person. We burst out onto the road, gasping for breath. For one glorious second, I thought we were safe. Then Ryan stopped dead. The car. I looked. The SUV was gone. At first, I honestly believed we'd reached the wrong spot. Then I saw the huge split boulder sitting beside the road. The same one we joked looked like a dinosaur's head when we parked. This was the exact place. The vehicle had vanished. Ryan stared at the empty stretch of asphalt. How? I had no answer. The chainsaw roared again from inside the trees. We ran. There wasn't anywhere else to go. The road stretched endlessly through the forest with no houses, no lights, and no signs of civilization. We kept expecting headlights to appear behind us, but every time we looked back there was only darkness. After what felt like forever, headlights finally appeared ahead. Ryan stumbled into the middle of the road waving both arms. An old pickup truck screeched to a stop. The driver rolled down his window just enough to see us. "You boys all right?" Before I could answer, the chainsaw echoed from somewhere behind us. The man's expression changed instantly. "Get in." We didn't hesitate. He locked the doors before pulling away. None of us spoke until the forest disappeared behind us. He drove us to the nearest small town and dropped us outside the police station. The officers listened carefully while we explained everything. Missing friends. A man with a chainsaw. A disappearing SUV. One officer asked us to describe Aaron and Noah. We did. He left the room for nearly 20 minutes. When he returned, his face had gone pale. "We can't find either of them." "What do you mean?" I asked. "No driver's licenses. No vehicle registration matching the SUV description. No university records under those names." Ryan laughed nervously. "That's impossible." "I wish it wasn't," the policeman said. The next morning, police drove us back to campus. I expected to prove everyone wrong the second we reached our dorm. Instead, our suite looked like Aaron and Noah had never lived there. Their beds were gone. Their clothes. Their laptops. The posters they'd hung on the walls. Even the extra coffee maker Aaron insisted on bringing. My roommate's side of the closet was completely empty. The resident advisor looked confused when I asked where they'd gone. "You've lived here alone all semester." "No," I shouted. I looked at Ryan. "You've met them." Ryan nodded immediately. "I've had dinner with both of them." The RA simply stared at us. "I don't know who you're talking about." Campus security checked surveillance footage from previous weeks. Ryan and I appeared constantly. Aaron and Noah never did. The police eventually came to one conclusion. The names Aaron and Noah were fake. The identification they'd shown the college had been expertly forged. Whoever they really were had spent months building fake identities, gaining my trust, learning my habits, and waiting for the right opportunity to get me somewhere isolated. The campsite had never been the destination. The empty road had. The officers believed the chainsaw wasn't meant to be used. It was meant to make us run into the woods where other people were already waiting. Something interrupted their plan before they could finish it, forcing them to abandon the SUV and disappear before police arrived. The investigation eventually went cold. No suspects, no real names, no arrests. Every few months, I'll still search online to see if anyone has uncovered who those men actually were. Nothing. Sometimes I wonder if they found someone else who trusted them. Sometimes I think about how easily Ryan and I could have stayed inside that locked SUV instead of getting out to look for them. And every time I meet someone who seems almost too friendly, who somehow shares all the same interests and always knows exactly what to say, I remember 2 roommates who laughed with me for 4 months, and then vanished so completely that, according to every official record, they were never there at all.